I came home that evening and saw my whole life lying beside the trash, my photo frames cracked, my wedding dress soaked in rainwater, and the quilt my late husband's mother made thrown out like it never meant anything. My daughter-in-law was standing there with that perfect smile that always hit a knife. We decided to do some cleaning. She said those old things are useless. I looked straight into her eyes and said, "Then I'll clean out what's useless to me, too." She laughed. But that laugh, cold careless, was the last time she'd ever looked down on me. Because that day, something inside me broke, and something stronger took its place. But before I share my story with you, I'd love to know you're here with me. Drop a simple hi in the comments so I know you're listening, or tell me where you're watching from. I love seeing how far my story can reach. Thank you. And now, let me tell you everything. If you believe no one is ever too old to take back their power, please hit subscribe. My name is Seraphine Kestrel, and this is how I learned that being quiet doesn't mean being weak. The cab stopped in front of the yellow-painted house that had been my world for 30 years. The desert air of Santa Fe still smelled faintly of rain, but the scent of turned soil clung to my dress, the smell of the grave I had just walked away from. I had buried my younger sister Grace that morning in Flagstaff. I thought coming home would mean peace. Instead, I found my life scattered beside the trash bins. My family albums, the scarf my mother knitted before her hands gave out, and the framed photo of my late husband all dumped half-soaked in mud. It was as if someone had decided to erase my existence with one careless sweep. I stood frozen, one hand still clutching the handle of my suitcase, the other trembling as I reached for that scarf. The yarn tore in my fingers, and the sound, it wasn't loud, but it was sharp enough to feel like something inside me split. Averly appeared from behind the garage, her sundress too bright for the gray sky. Her smile was sweet, practiced the kind that could charm strangers and cut family to pieces. "We decided to do some cleaning," she said lightly. "Those old things were useless anyway." I turned slowly to face her, keeping my voice level. "Then I'll clean out what's useless to me, too." For a second, her eyes flickered confusion or contempt, I couldn't tell. She folded her arms. "You don't need to take it so personally, Seraphine. We're turning your room into a nursery. You'll stay in the storage room for a while. It's temporary." I didn't answer. I didn't scream. I bent down, wiped the mud off the photo frame, and took a picture of the pile with my phone. The shutter clicked twice, steady and cold. She thought she'd humiliated me. What she didn't know was that humiliation is temporary, but documentation is permanent. Inside the house, every trace of me had been replaced. My furniture was pushed aside, my books boxed up. There was no seat left that felt like mine. I found my handbag and checked my wallet. The folded photocopy of my property deed was still there, slightly creased but intact. When I slipped it back, I caught her watching me, her eyes sharp as a hawk's. That look told me she already knew how much this house meant and how much she wanted it. She touched her stomach suddenly, a deliberate motion. "Oh, I should take it easy," she murmured loud enough for me to hear. "The baby doesn't like stress." I froze. "Baby 3 months," she said, smiling proudly. "Rowan and I wanted to surprise you, but I guess now's as good a time as any." My son's voice echoed faintly from the kitchen, unaware, maybe unwilling to get between us. I held my tongue. Instead of replying, I walked to my old room, already half empty, and took another photo of the boxes labeled "Donate." My name was on some of them. The irony didn't miss me. That night, I sat on the porch steps, scrolling through the images I'd taken: the scarf, the album, the trash, each one a record, a weapon, a reminder. When the desert wind picked up, I whispered to the darkness I gave love freely, but I never gave away my dignity. I took out my phone, searched my contact list, and pressed Atticus Vale, my late husband's lawyer. Seraphine. His voice was low, cautious. "I need to see you tomorrow morning," I said. "Something wrong?" Let's just say I murmured, staring at the house that no longer felt like mine. It's time to show who's really in charge here. The storage room they gave me was barely 6 feet by 6, a square of stale air and peeling paint. A single light bulb hung from the ceiling, its cord swaying every time the wind passed through the cracks in the wall. The mattress folded against the corner had a stain that looked older than my marriage. They called it temporary. I called it what it was, a message. The first night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking of Grace's grave, the way the priest said dust to dust, and how fitting that sounded now, seeing my own life turn to dust in a house I paid for. Around midnight, I opened the old chest that had followed me from my first home to this one. Inside were my husband's papers, expense ledgers, bank statements, and an address book. I had kept them out of habit the way widows keep their ghosts neatly filed. But this time, habit became instinct. I turned on the light and began to read. The handwriting was mine, and his two lives once blended. The recent pages, though, weren't familiar. Transactions labeled remodel decor miscellaneous. I opened my laptop, logged into my emergency savings account, the one I'd let Rowan use when needed. My breath caught. 60,000 had become 9. Miami flights, furniture stores, jewelry boutiques. I didn't want to believe it. But belief doesn't change a balance. I started writing everything down, date, amount, recipient. I took pictures of each screen, then emailed them to myself, marking the subject, for record. It wasn't anger that drove me. It was clarity. The kind of calm that comes when you realize silence has been mistaken for permission. Just before dawn, I heard the smell of baked bread drift from next door. Nettie Harjo, my neighbor of 20 years, was already awake. I slipped out quietly, clutching my shawl against the chill. Nettie opened her door before I knocked. "You look like you haven't slept in days," she said. I smiled faintly. "You could say that." Over coffee, she told me things I didn't want to hear but needed to. That a moving truck had come twice while I was away. That Averly sold the antique oak furniture I'd inherited, counting cash on the driveway. That she'd been driving a different car every month, and sometimes when Rowan left early, a man came by with papers in his hand. "A real estate agent, I think," Nettie added softly. "Didn't want to gossip, but you deserve to know." When I returned to my room, my legs shook, not from fear, but from the weight of confirmation. I opened the chest again, searching for the one thing I needed most proof that this house was still mine. Beneath a stack of old letters, I found a photocopy of the original deed. My name, Seraphine Kestrel, alone. No co-owner, no transfer. And on the corner, my husband's handwriting, "Never remove your name." For a moment, I just stared at it. His voice came back like an echo. "Don't let anyone make you feel like a guest in your own life." I pressed the paper flat, smoothing its wrinkles with my palm. That note wasn't just love, it was instruction. By noon, I had a plan. First, meet Atticus Vale at his office. Second, change every password and cancel every secondary card. Third, print all statements and store them in a safe place. I sat down with my notebook and wrote one sentence at the bottom of the page in bold letters, as if I were signing a new version of myself. Truth needs evidence. From now on, I'll speak in ink, not emotion. Outside, the morning sun rose over Agave Lane, throwing long shadows across the yard. Somewhere inside the house, Averly was laughing on the phone, her voice, lighter lies, intact. I folded the deed carefully, slipped it into my purse, and smiled for the first time in days. Let her laugh. The paper in my hands was older, tougher, and far more powerful than her smile. The next morning, I drove to Canyon Street, where the sun hit the sandstone buildings like it was burning away all the secrets hidden inside them. Atticus Vale's office sat on the corner, the same one where my husband and I had once signed our will 20 years ago. I had barely slept, but my mind was sharp, the kind of clarity that comes only after you've been humiliated and have nothing left to lose. Atticus greeted me with that mix of calm and precision that made him dangerous in a courtroom. He was in his 70s now, but his eyes were as clear as the desert sky. I placed everything on his desk, the photocopy of the deed, the bank statements, the photos of my belongings in the trash, and the handwritten ledger from my husband's box. He adjusted his glasses, flipped through each page slowly, then opened his computer to check the county database. "There's been no recorded transfer of title," he said, tapping the screen. "This house is still yours, 100%. Not joint tenancy, not shared ownership, just you." I felt something heavy drop inside me, not fear this time, but relief sharpened into purpose. Atticus leaned back and said, "Then here's what we'll do. 3 steps. You follow them exactly." He outlined the first one like a general mapping out a war. Step 1, change every password, cancel every shared card, and activate transaction alerts. "No more joint access," he said firmly. "You can't protect your peace if they can still reach your purse." Step 2, create a full inventory of the property, every item from furniture to jewelry. File a statement of unauthorized sale for the antiques your daughter-in-law took. "That gives us leverage," he explained. Step 3, send a notice to quit or lease. They could either sign a lease at $1,200 a month and start paying back $45,000 in monthly installments, or vacate the property within 30 days. "They're living there at your mercy," Atticus added. "It's what we call tenancy at will. The law is on your side, Seraphine, but you have to keep your emotions out of it." He printed the documents, the crisp sound of the paper slicing through the air like a verdict. I stared at the words, Owner Seraphine Kestrel. It looked like a name I was only now remembering how to claim. Atticus watched me for a long moment before asking, "You mentioned she's pregnant." "That's what she said," I replied. "No proof, just words." He nodded slowly. "Then you require medical confirmation. If she tries to delay or manipulate based on stress, you'll already have precedent on your side. Don't argue, document." As I gathered my things, his secretary brought in a message slip. "You might want to hear this," Atticus said. "An anonymous caller reported seeing your antique furniture in a shop in Albuquerque. Same make, same markings. He made a note to contact the store. If we can confirm it's yours, we can add financial damages." When I stood to leave, he walked me to the door. "Seraphine people like her count on you losing your temper. Don't give her that gift. Stay calm, act in writing, and remember every time you choose silence, make sure it's the kind that builds a case." Outside, the street glowed under the white sun. I looked up at the office sign, Vale and Associates, and whispered, "I'm not asking for revenge. I'm asking for order." Then I turned toward home, feeling something steady return to my spine. That evening, I moved differently through the house. I bought a small electric stove, stored food in a cooler, and began cooking in the corner of the storage room like a tenant waiting out a storm. I answered Averly's questions with quiet civility, smiled when she bragged about the nursery, and pretended not to notice when she peeked at my phone. The notice had been mailed that afternoon, registered and stamped. I marked the date on my calendar like a countdown, not to the end of peace, but to the beginning of my freedom. A week later, Averly decided to host a family dinner. The invitation came printed on embossed paper as if to disguise the manipulation underneath. I knew what it was before I even opened it a performance. The kind of gathering where every smile was a lie rehearsed. That evening, I walked into my own dining room, now unrecognizable. The table I'd bought with my husband's first bonus check gleamed under golden light, polished to perfection. The same chandelier we'd hung together now glowed above faces that didn't belong there. Averly wore a pale blue dress that framed her supposed pregnancy. Lorraine, her mother, was complimenting her glow, already calling herself Grandma. Silas, her father, sat stiff and formal, sipping wine. Rowan avoided my eyes. Mom Averly began cheerfully. "We wanted to talk about the future. You've done so much for us, and we think it's time you focus on yourself. Maybe transfer the house to us so things are simpler. You'll always have a place here." Her tone was gentle, almost maternal, but I heard the control underneath. Silas added, "It's really for everyone's convenience. You'll still live here, but paperwork should reflect reality. You know how confusing titles can be." I said nothing. The only sound in the room was the clink of silverware. Then I set my fork down, reached into my bag, and placed 2 papers neatly on the table: the printed deed and the notice to quit or lease. "If we're talking about paperwork," I said quietly, "let's discuss it properly. This house is legally mine, and I've already clarified the terms for anyone living here." The room froze. Lorraine's smile faltered. Rowan looked at his wife as if silently asking what she'd done. Averly blinked twice, then forced a laugh. "Mother, you're stressing yourself." "I'm pregnant. Remember, I shouldn't be dealing with this kind of negativity." 3 months, wasn't it? I asked, my voice even. "Which doctor confirmed that?" Her laugh cracked. "It's early," she said quickly. "I don't need appointments yet." Lorraine's hand twitched around her napkin, her eyes darting between us. The mask slipped for a second. I picked up the printout of my bank statement and read aloud: "Miami trip, $3,250. Remodel, $14,000. Jewelry, $2,400. These were all charged to accounts under my name." Rowan tried to interject, voice trembling. "I was going to repay that, Mom. It's just been hectic. Averly cut him off. It's our money. Husband and wife share everything." I turned to her, my tone steady as stone. "Not when it's stolen under my signature." The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush air. Then, in one practiced motion, she stood clutching her stomach and gasping. "Oh God, my baby, you're upsetting me, Seraphine. I can't breathe." She stumbled backward, and Rowan caught her panic rising in his voice. Lorraine shouted for me to leave the table. I gathered my documents, calmly sliding them into the folder. "I'll let my lawyer explain the rest," I said, stepping away from the chaos. Her sobs filled the room like a bad melody. As I reached the hallway, I heard Silas mutter, "She's cruel. How could a mother treat them that way? I didn't stop walking." Cruel, I thought, was selling a woman's life piece by piece while smiling over dinner. In my room, I sat before the framed photo of my late husband. The light flickered soft and gold. "You once told me," I whispered, "that home is where you're safe. But now I see sometimes you have to fight for home, even if it means fighting your own." Downstairs, I could still hear Averly's cries, dramatic and hollow. I closed my door, locked it, and finally exhaled. The house smelled of expensive perfume and deceit, but for the first time in months, I felt a strange calm settle in my chest. The kind that comes when a war has already begun and you've decided you're ready for it. 3 days after that dinner, silence became the language of the house. Averly stopped speaking to me entirely, yet her laughter drifted through the walls, sharp, echoing, deliberate. It was the laughter of victory, the kind that feeds on humiliation. Rowan avoided me too, though I could hear his footsteps pacing upstairs late into the night. They moved as if I were already gone, a ghost haunting what used to be mine. I ate alone in the storage room. The air smelled of mold and disinfectant. My meals were canned soup and crackers because Averly had put a new lock on the refrigerator. "It's for the baby's safety," she'd said through the door, her tone falsely sweet. "The smell of leftovers makes me nauseous." I didn't argue. She had already decided that pregnancy, real or not, was her shield. The quiet of those days was heavier than noise. I started to feel a dull pressure in my chest, like something tight was building behind my ribs. I told myself it was just exhaustion, maybe the altitude, maybe stress. I refused to give her the satisfaction of knowing I felt weak. Then one afternoon, my phone buzzed with a message from Atticus. "The notice has been officially delivered," it read. "They've signed the receipt. If they don't respond within 30 days, you can take it to court." I reread that line until it sank in. The law was on my side now. The thought steadied me, though I knew it also meant war was coming. A few mornings later, I saw a delivery man hand Averly a small package at the gate. She snatched it quickly, glancing around like a thief. When she went out later, I passed by the porch and saw the discarded wrapper fluttering in the dirt. I picked it up, a home pregnancy test bought online. The expiration date had passed 2 years ago. I took a picture. Proof wasn't about rage anymore, it was about pattern. By Thursday night, the pain in my chest became unbearable. I was sitting on the edge of the bed trying to catch my breath when the room began to tilt. The phone slipped from my hand and hit the floor. I remember hearing a door creak somewhere, then darkness swallowed everything. When I woke, the world was sirens and bright lights. Nettie's voice cut through the noise, calling my name. She had found me collapsed on the floor and called for help. Through the ambulance window, I caught a glimpse of my house bathed in red lights. Averly stood by the gate, arms folded, her face blank. She didn't come closer. For a second, I thought I saw a smirk, small, satisfied. At the hospital, the doctor told me I'd had a mild heart attack. "You need to remove the stress in your life, Mrs. Kestrel," he said kindly. I almost laughed. Stress wasn't just in my life, it was living under my roof. No one from the house came to visit. Not Rowan, not Averly. Only Nettie brought me soup and held my hand as I stared at the ceiling, counting the days. When I was discharged, I sat by the window of my hospital room, watching the Rio Grande shimmer in the distance. It was time to cut the cord, not out of defeat, but survival. If they want the house so badly, I whispered to myself, they can have the walls, but not the power that built them. That night, I called Atticus. "Find me a small place to rent," I said, "somewhere near the river." My voice didn't shake. Leaving wasn't losing, it was strategy. 2 weeks later, I moved into a one-bedroom apartment overlooking the Rio Grande. The sound of the river filled the space where loneliness should have been. I unpacked slowly my clothes, my ledger, my husband's framed photo. The walls smelled like paint. Not memories, and that was comforting. Juniper flew in from Denver the next day, and Keaton drove up from Austin. They'd both seen Averly's latest stunt online, a glowing Instagram post of her cradling a fake baby bump with the caption, "Counting the days until our miracle arrives." I hadn't looked, but Juniper showed me anyway. She used a sonogram image from Google. She said, her voice tight with fury. When they tried to visit the old house, Averly refused to open the gate. She'd changed the locks and told them I'd chosen to leave. Even Rowan didn't come out. Atticus confirmed that I had every right to reclaim entry, but he suggested we hold the upper hand quietly. "They're tightening their own noose," he said. A week later, Atticus called again with news that made my stomach twist. I heard back from a furniture dealer in Albuquerque. They bought an antique oak set from a woman named Averly Pike. There's security footage. I signed the authorization to file a civil claim for stolen property. It wasn't just about the furniture. It was proof of her intent. Nettie stopped by that evening carrying a bag of bread and a look of concern. "You remember that man I told you about, the one who came by when your son was gone?" she said quietly. "He was here again last week. Said he was a realtor. Averly promised him commission if he sold the house fast." The words hit like ice water. She wasn't just trying to live in my house. She was trying to sell it. Before I could process that, the phone rang. It was Lorraine Averly's mother. Her voice trembled. "Seraphine, please. I'm sorry for what she's done. I need to see you. There's something you must have." We met the next morning at a cafe on Canyon Road. The air smelled of roasted coffee and rain. Lorraine sat in a corner booth, her hands shaking as she slid a thick envelope across the table. "I can't protect her anymore," she said. "She's hurt too many people." Inside the envelope were hospital records. My eyes scanned the words until they blurred. Averly Knox, infertility due to prior surgery. No pregnancy, no possibility. Behind the medical forms were credit statements showing $23,000 in debt and 3 other fraud cases, each involving men, she'd conned with the same story of a fake pregnancy. "She lies to survive," Lorraine said through tears, "but I can't let her destroy another family, especially yours." I sat in silence, the weight of it pressing on me. For months, I'd felt like I was losing my grip on reality, doubting myself at every turn. Now the truth sat in front of me, cold, undeniable, documented. I folded the papers carefully and placed them in my bag. Juniper, who had waited nearby, came over once Lorraine left. "Mom," she said softly, "we can handle the legal part from here. but the rest you'll have to say it out loud." I nodded, looking out the cafe window where the neon sign flickered against the rain. My reflection stared back, older, thinner, but steady. "There's no doubt left," I said quietly. "Only proof. And it's time." The world saw it. The city lights shimmered across the wet street, painting my face in fractured colors. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a victim of my silence. I felt like the silence before a storm controlled waiting ready. By late afternoon, the sky over Santa Fe was painted in slow-moving gold, the kind that looks peaceful but feels heavy. The light spilled through my curtains, soft but accusing. On my dining table lay everything that mattered now. The folder Lorraine had given me, the bank statements, the deed, the notice to quit or lease, and the photographs of what used to be my life. I had invited them here not for reconciliation, but for reckoning. Rowan agreed hesitantly, his voice uncertain over the phone. Averly, as always, accepted with confidence, certain she could charm her way through anything. Juniper sat beside me, her laptop open to a video call with Atticus Vale, whose steady voice filled the silence like the ticking of a clock. At 6 sharp, the knock came. Averly entered, first dressed in a loose ivory dress, a hand resting on her stomach, the performance still intact. She held a glass of juice and smiled with that same practiced grace that once fooled me. Rowan followed, head-lowered shoulders, sagging, a man caught between loyalty and truth. "Mom," he said quietly, "can we please keep this civil?" I nodded. "That depends on how honest we're willing to be." We sat. The air was tense enough to hum. "I didn't call you here to fight," I began. "I called you here to make sure the truth is spoken aloud once and for all." I reached for the first document and placed it in front of Averly. "This is a medical report from St. Vincent Hospital," I said evenly. "It states that you are not and were never pregnant." Her face didn't flinch right away. She gave a small laugh. "Fake papers," she said. "Anyone could print that. Maybe you should stick to knitting seraphine." Juniper slid a second file across the table. "This one comes directly from the hospital system," she said. "Verified with a doctor's signature. Public records can be checked if you'd like." Rowan's face drained of color. "You told me you had a sonogram last month," he said hoarsely. "You showed me pictures." Averly didn't meet his eyes. Her voice dropped. "It was complicated. You wouldn't understand." I moved the next file forward, the receipts from the antique store in Albuquerque. "These are invoices for the oak furniture sold under your name. There's video footage, too." Her tone snapped. "I did it for us for the baby, for the house I was trying to fix things. You were trying to fix them with what wasn't yours," I replied. "You sold pieces of our history for cash. You called it remodeling. I call it theft." The mask on her face cracked. She leaned forward. "Do you think you're the only one who's ever lost something I wanted a better life than the one I was handed?" I didn't raise my voice. "I only opened the last folder, the one that made her hands tremble, and that's why you signed a brokerage agreement to sell the entire house for $740,000. Rowan looked at me stunned. When I turned the contract toward him, my finger tracing her signature at the bottom. "This was filed last month. She planned to sell the home while I was still living in it, and she used my address, my records, my name." Averly's breath quickened. "I just wanted out," she shouted. "I wanted something that felt like mine." "You wouldn't understand. You live in the past." I met her gaze. "You're right. I live in the past because it's the only place my integrity still lives. But I never stole anyone else's future to find it." The silence that followed was unbearable. Then suddenly she broke. Her voice cracked under its own weight. "Fine," she cried. "I'm not pregnant. I made it up. I just needed time to sell the house and leave." "Are you happy now?" Rowan slammed his glass against the wall, the shatter cutting through her words. "You lied to me, to my mother, to everyone." Averly grabbed her purse, tears streaking her face, and bolted toward the door. As she turned, something fell from her bag, a used pregnancy test, the second line drawn faintly in pink marker. It landed at my feet. She ran slamming the door behind her. For a long moment, none of us moved. Rowan sank into a chair, his hands over his face. Juniper closed her laptop. The sound of the river outside seemed louder now, as if echoing the quiet collapse inside the room. "She's gone," Rowan whispered, voice breaking. "After everything she's done." I gathered the papers one by one, aligning them neatly. "Now we have what we need," Juniper said softly. "Proof, witnesses. The truth?" I looked at her and shook my head. "No, sweetheart. What we have is loss. But maybe sometimes you have to lose the wrong things to find the right light again." The last of the daylight disappeared. The river kept moving. And I realized that survival doesn't always feel like triumph. It just feels like breathing again after too long underwater. A year passes quietly when you've already lived through noise. The seasons changed over Santa Fe, and with them, so did I. After the confrontation, Averly vanished from our lives, leaving behind debt, fake documents, and silence. Atticus filed the lawsuits, and the court moved faster than I expected. She never appeared for her hearing. The judge's ruling was short, and final ownership confirmed damages awarded. Rowan signed his consent, his name trembling as he wrote. Lorraine called months later. Her voice was heavy with a mix of shame and relief. "They caught her in Albuquerque," she said. "Fraud charges. Different victims, same story." I thanked her not for the information, but for choosing truth over blood. One morning, Rowan came to see me at the apartment by the river. He looked older than his years, his eyes sunken, his hands empty. He didn't speak at first. When he finally did, his voice cracked like the sound of something finally breaking free. "Mom," he said, "I let her do it. I let her turn you into someone I didn't defend. I'm sorry." I looked at him for a long time before answering. "The worst thing wasn't what she did, Rowan. It was your silence. But you came back. That's enough." He nodded, tears slipping down his face, and for the first time in years I saw my son again, not the man she had molded, but the boy I once raised to know right from wrong. He began sending monthly payments, fulfilling the restitution agreement, and moved into a modest apartment near downtown. It wasn't much, but it was honest. When spring came, I returned to the house on Agave Lane. The walls were tired, but they still stood. I painted them myself, pale yellow, like the first time my husband and I had done it together. Atticus helped me recover the antique oak furniture from storage, now cleaned and restored. I hung the photos of Grace and my husband on the living room wall, their smiles catching the sunlight. In the backyard, I planted bougainvillea along the fence, vivid pink against the adobe walls. They were stubborn flowers growing best in dry soil, blooming brighter after being cut back. I liked that about them. They reminded me of women like me, weathered, but still in color. That summer, Juniper and Keaton came home with their families. Rowan joined quieter now, more deliberate. We sat around a table I had sanded and stained myself. For the first time in years, laughter filled the house, not forced, not polite, but real. Rowan lifted his glass and said softly, "If you hadn't stood your ground, we would have lost you, maybe all of us." I smiled. "You didn't lose me. I just had to find myself first." As the sun dipped low, I went inside and picked up the old shawl my mother had made, the same one I'd found by the trash that day. I draped it over the back of the couch, its fibers mended and clean. The light from the window hit the photo of my family, glowing warm and soft like time forgiving itself. Last year, my belongings were thrown out beside a trash bin. Today, they're exactly where they belong. Not because someone gave them back, but because I took them back. The evening breeze drifted through the open window, carrying the scent of flowers and the faint laughter of my children outside. I closed the door gently, letting the house hold the sound. Home isn't just where you live. It's where you stand up again, even when the people you love are the ones who knocked you down. And after everything, I was still standing right here in the only place that ever truly belonged to me.